Hello and welcome to the week 4. We are in week 4 in algebra. We are also in the week of September 6th. So make sure when you go to do your assignments this week, you are going to the week 4 folder. I do want you to have your math notebook out. Remember, I do want you taking notes as we go through this recording. And I do have 2 warm-up questions that will remind us of what we did last week. And it will also help you if you need to go back and maybe redo an assignment from last week. Remember, you can redo assignments. You just need to send me a message when you do that. So I did want to take some time and review some concepts we learned about compound inequalities last week. So I've got a number line here where I've got some graphed pieces, and I want you to write an inequality that the graph is showing. So remember the inequality signs that you will use for open and closed circles. And then for number 2, I want you to write the compound or solve the compound inequality. So please remember, you do need to be taking notes and you do need to be doing the warm-up problems. If you are just watching this recording, you're not going to get anything out of it. If you're actually trying the problems and taking notes, you will get way more out of this. So if I were to ask you for you to share with me your notes, you should be able to take a picture of your notes and send those to me. So at this time, I do want you to click pause so that you can try the warm-up problems in your math notebook. And then when you're ready to check your work with mine, you'll click play. But at this time, you do need to click pause and try these on your own. All right, so we have an open circle at number 1, and then it's shaded to the left, meaning it's going to include all the numbers that are less than 1. So what does this open circle mean? Does it mean that we're going to include the number 1? No, because it's an open circle, we don't include the number 1. So to write our inequality, we're just going to use x is less than, because remember we're shading, we're including all those numbers below 1. X is less than 1. So that's the first part of our inequality. Over here to the right, we've got a closed circle at 9. So the circle is closed, and we're including all the numbers that are above 9 or greater than 9. So remember what we do when we've got a closed circle. So to show that we've got a closed circle, we're going to say x is, remember, greater than, but we also need to put that equal sign, greater than or equal to, because we've got a closed circle. So to show a closed circle, we're going to put that line below to show greater than or equal to 9, because we can include the number 9 in this description. So let's put it all together over here. Our inequalities are going to be that x is less than 1, or because we've got that space in between here, we've got all this space in between. So we're going to say or. And then it can be that x has to be greater than or equal to 9 because we have that closed circle. So remember, when we have an open circle, it's only going to be greater than greater than or less than. No equal sign underneath there, but when we are dealing with closed circles, we have to have that equal sign underneath there, that greater than or equal to or less than or equal to. All right, and our second equation over here is a compound inequality, which means we're going to set up 2 equations to solve, very similar to like when we did absolute value functions and we set up 2 equations to solve. So we've got really 2 equations going on here. We've got the fact that x plus 2 is greater than 4. So I'm going to write that out over here. I'm going to, let's see, don't have a whole lot of space. 4 is less than x plus 2, or we can read that as x plus 2 is greater than 4. So that's the one equation that I'm going to solve for. Let's solve for that. So to solve for x, we're just going to subtract 2 from both sides, and I'm left with x is greater than 2. That's one portion of my answer. We also have another equation in here, don't we? If we focus, let's see, let's change my color so I can underline that. We also have the statement that x plus 2 is less than 8. if we focus on the right side. So we also have that x plus 2 is less than 8. And we can solve that equation by subtracting 2 from both sides. And when we do that, we get x is less than 6. So these are my two answers here. Remember, I've got, this is my complete answer right here. The x is greater than 2, and x can be less than 2. So we would say and here. These two answers are both going to satisfy that compound inequality. So remember, to solve compound inequalities, you need to see what two equations you're dealing with and pull those apart and write your two equations and solve for each of your equations. All right, I'm going to move on, so if you need more time, go ahead and click pause. I wanted to go over just really quickly the grade book. So we're going to focus on the bottom part of this slide here. This icon, so if you were to open your grades tab and you see this little puzzle piece, green puzzle piece here, it tells you that you submitted an assignment. If there is not a green puzzle piece next to your assignment, it means you have not submitted it yet. Remember, you can also use the grades tab. There's lots of great things you can use the grade tab to check out. You can see what you missed on assignments. So please make sure that when you're going to your grades tab, you're not just looking at what your overall grade is, that you're actually taking time to click on the assignments in the grade book to open those up. And when you open those up, you're going to see specifically what you missed, as well as comments from me that'll explain why you missed that problem and help you do the problem correctly. Because remember that this is not true. Remember that, get rid of this one. You can redo low scoring assignments, and you should be. But before you do that, you need to actually open the assignment up and read my comments. Read my comments. I'm helping you try to see where you made a mistake. So please make sure you're taking the time to do that. If you redo an assignment or you submit late work, remember you must send me a message, otherwise I won't know to grade it. So some quick reminders about that. This week you will be taking a quiz that covers sessions 1 through 4. So please make sure you review sessions 1 through 4 before you take the quiz. A wonderful way to review for the quiz would be to go through your graded assignments in sessions 1 through 4, and if you had some low scoring assignments, redo those. That would be a great way to help you prepare for the quiz. And then you're going to go into Unit 1, Session 5, and really in Session 5 we're going to review solving equations, and what we're really going to focus on is justifying each step that you use when you solve equations using the property of equality. And we'll go over that in this recording. And then you're going to do a quick, the last assignment I meant to say for the week will be solving an inequality problem that is related to the real world where you'll set up an equation and solve and justify each step. So we're going to learn right now about how we justify steps when we're solving equations. So when we solve equations, let's talk about the general steps that we use to solve for a variable in equations. So when we solve for equations, the first thing that we do is we locate the variable we're trying to solve for an equation. We locate it, we find it. And the whole goal is that we want to get that variable all alone on one side of the equation and move all the terms to the other side of the equation so that we're left with our variable on one side of the equation all alone. So in order to do that, to get the variable all alone, what we do is we identify the operations that are being done to that variable, and then we use the inverse operations to undo those operations and isolate the variable. And inverse operations is just a fancy way of saying that we're going to do the opposite to undo whatever's being done to the variable to isolate the variable. And we'll talk about inverse operations as we go through this recording today. So it's what we do to undo the variables that are being done, or undo the what's being done to the variable to get it all alone. And we've got some equality, properties of equalities that will help us complete the task of solving for variables. And what are those properties? They are at the bottom here. So we're going to start with the addition property of equality. And really what that means is that if you add one thing to one side of the equation, you must do it to the other side of the equation. So here, if we were to add C to the left side of the equation, we would need to add C to the right side of the equation. Think of a teeter-totter or a seesaw. It needs to stay balanced. It needs to stay level. So if we add something to one side of our seesaw or teeter-totter, we have to add that same amount to the other side of our teeter-totter to keep it balanced, to keep the equation the same. So that's the addition property of equality, is if you add something to one side of the equation, you must add that same amount to the other side. Very similar is the subtraction property of equality, and that's if we subtract something from one side of the equation, we have to subtract that same amount from the other side. And you're going to see we're kind of having a pattern here of whatever we do to one side of the equation, we have to do to the other side. So if we're multiplying something on one side of the equation, we have to multiply that same amount on the other side. And then same with division. If we are dividing something from one side of the equation, we have to divide that same amount on the other side. So really what we're saying is whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other side. And we can do that by using our properties of equality that we have listed here. And those are the properties of equalities. That's how we can justify, if we justify each step for solving equations. And we're going to take a minute to do that in the next slide. But before we do here, let's review what an inverse operation is. So an inverse operation is just operations that undo each other. So the inverse operation, the operation that reverses the effect of another operation. For example, addition and subtraction are inverse operations. They will undo one another. Multiplication, the opposite of multiplying is dividing, so those are inverse operations. So just think of the operations that are opposite one another. So let me put inverse operations, let's put that to work here. So over here on the right, I've got an equation. I'm going to pull the simple equation to really explain the idea of inverse operations. So here we've got this equation, x minus 4 equals 10. So we want to solve this equation using inverse operations. I don't want you to use the guess and check method of like, well, I know what minus 4 equals 10. I can do that in my head. What I want you to do is actually use the inverse operation. So to use the inverse operation, what you need to ask yourself is what is being done to the variable x? Remember, we are trying to find the value of x. So to find the value of x, we want to get x all alone on one side of our equation. So that means we need to get rid of this 4. So since x is being subtracted by 4, what is the opposite? What is the opposite of subtraction? It is addition. So we're going to add 4. We're going to use the inverse operation, which would mean add 4 to both sides. So negative 4 plus 4 is 0, so we're left with just x on the left side. And then 10 plus 4 is 14. So we were able to solve this equation by applying the inverse operation. The opposite of subtracting was adding. So what we really did is to justify the step is we used the addition property of equality. And this is what you're going to be doing this week, is you're going to use the inverse operation and then identify what property you used by doing so. And here I've got more examples on the next slide. I'm going to the next slide, so if you need more time, go ahead and click pause. So here's an example of what you're going to be doing this week. in Unit 1, Session 5, is you're going to be solving equations, and then you're going to be really focusing on telling me what the property of equality you use, which property of equality you use to solve the equation. So let's look at an example. Let's go through and kind of do the steps that we would need to solve. So the equation is x plus 6 equals 10. So first of all, what's the variable we're trying to solve for? If you said x, you are correct. We're trying to solve for x. Then what operation is being performed on the variable? So x is 6 is being added to x. So 6 is being added to x. That's what's happening to x. It's being added to x. What is the inverse operation that we're going to use? So we need to do the opposite of adding. Since x is being added to, the opposite to solve this is subtraction. So we are going to actually be subtracting to solve. So let's go ahead and do that. So x plus 6 equals 10. So since x is being added to, 6 is being added to x, we need to do the opposite. We need to do the inverse operation to solve this. The inverse operation would be to subtract 6 from both sides. And when we subtract both from x from 6 sides, we get, when we subtract 6 from both sides, we get 10 minus 6 is 4. That's our answer. So the property of equality that we used is this step right here. This is the step. We subtracted 6 from both sides. That's what we did to solve. So since we subtracted, that's called the subtraction property of equality, because what we subtracted from one side, we subtracted from the other to keep that balance, that equation to have the same quantity. So here we subtracted 6 from the left side, and then we did it to the right side. We subtracted from both sides of the equation. And doing that, we use the subtraction property of equality, not of equation, of equality. So that's what you're going to be doing this week of that should be an L-I-T-Y, equality. Is explaining how you solve for your variable. And remember, what you do to one side of the equation, you have to do to the other. And those are really your properties of equality, of what you do to one side, you do to the other. And then just specifically, what did you do? If you subtract, you're using the subtraction property of equality. If you multiplied, you're using the multiplication property of inequalities. Of equality. So here, really quickly, what's the variable we're solving for? 2x equals 18. We're solving for x. Really, I want to go down to the end. We can skip these steps. So if we have 2x equals 18, how are we going to get x all alone? What is being done to x? The operation that's being performed on the variable, it's being multiplied. It's being multiplied by 2. So what's the inverse operation? What's the opposite of multiplying? It's dividing. The opposite of multiplying is dividing. So we're going to divide each side by 2 to solve, and we get x equals 18 divided by 2 is 9. So what property of inequality did we use to solve this equation? So what did we do to one side that we did to the other side? And if you said, well, we divided, we divided 2 on each side. So that means that we would be using the division property of equality. So here, since we divided each side, what we did to one side, we did to the other, and the operation we were using was division. So we used the division property of equality. And that's what you're going to do this week. You're just going to justify each step when you solve for variables by stating which property of equality you used. And again, that's just going to be whatever you did that you used to solve for the variable. Whatever you did to one side that you had to do to the other, that will be your property of equality. All right. It is time for the key phrase assignment. Remember, this is the week of September 6th recording, so that means that the date of the key phrase assignment needs to be the same. So you need to complete the week of 9/6, September 6th key phrase assignment. Those dates need to be the same. And the question you're going to answer is what we've been talking about in this recording. So please make sure you took good notes and watch this recording so that you know how to answer this. If you watch this recording, you'll have no problem answering this question. So the question is, what property of equality, we learned about 4 different properties of equality, is used to solve this equation below? X minus 1 equals 10. You don't need to tell me what the answer is. What I'm asking you is what property of equality is used to solve the equation. So again, you're not really solving the answer, you're telling me what property of equality is used to solve the equation. Alrighty, so if you need to review the directions to complete the key phrase assignment, those are below at the bottom of the screen. So you can complete that assignment and get your 10 points for watching this recording. And remember, as you're working through your assignments this week, if you need any help, I'm here for you. So just send me a message and I'll get you the help you need. Have a wonderful rest of your week.